Hey, how's it going? Welcome to my channel. If you're new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button. So in this video, I'm going to talk about my experience riding this bike, KTM 390 Adventure, off-road. And that's based on having 2,200 miles on the bike and also doing a 6-day, a little mini adventure, 6-day ride up to southern Colorado and spending 4 days riding the Alpine passes and parts of the Colorado Backcountry Discovery Route. So I feel like in that amount of time, I've got a good feel for what this bike is capable of and some of the things that maybe it's not capable of. So stick around and I'll talk about what you can expect from this bike riding it off-road. I want to start off by talking about what this bike is and is not. What it is a small displacement single-cylinder engine, 370 cc's, 44 horsepower. It is not going to ride like a twin-cylinder bike. It doesn't have the horsepower and it's not really happy being lugged. This is not meant to be an enduro bike. It's not meant to be taken on really aggressive enduro riding. But it can handle off-road. It can handle on-road. This bike is not meant to be loaded up with all kinds of luggage and a pillion passenger and travel all over. But it is meant to be loaded up with all kinds of luggage for solo adventures to get out and go. I've done it. It was a brilliant trip. I really enjoyed it. If you want to see what that was all about, if I remember, I'll put a link up here to riding the Alpine passes on this bike. What this bike is, it's a lot of fun to ride. And I'll talk about all the things that make this great and some of the things that I've learned about it that create some limitations on what it can do. If you ride this bike within its designed purpose, it is a fantastic bike. And you can't get past the lightweightness of this bike and how much fun and relaxing it is to ride. So what I'm going to talk about is the engine, the suspension, the ergonomics, the electronics, and basically just an overall feel of the bike. So let's get to it. All right, I want to talk about the engine here. It's 373 cc, 44 horsepower. I don't remember what the torque is. You can look that up. But I think it develops max torque around 6,800 RPM and max RPM around, I don't know, 8,800 RPM. The engine feels, I enjoy riding this bike. I like the way the engine feels. If you've ever seen like a 12-year-old kid who's finished off a 1-pound bag of Sour Patch Kids and all that hyper energy and they just need to go and run and get all that energy out, that's a little bit of what this engine reminds me of. When you keep the RPMs up, it feels like it wants to go, 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 and just wants to be let loose. So one of the things that I've learned about this engine is that it's really happiest in the 5,000 RPM range and higher, and pretty much if you keep it in the 6,000 to 8,000 RPM range, it'll do almost anything you could possibly ask of it. Off-road, second gear, 5,000 RPM is really a great comfortable place if you're doing climbing and even getting through some rocky technical spots. You might have to use the clutch a little bit, but not bad, and you're running at a reasonable speed. Now if it gets really technical, really rocky, you can drop it down to first, and I have found that first gear has a lot better range to it. I can use those lower RPMs and be able to kind of pick my way through things and not worry about stalling the engine. I haven't really had to do a lot of clutch work, but I haven't ridden in some really technical terrain, but I have ridden some quite steep stuff, especially with the Colorado Alpine passes. And I think for most average riders, this engine will be perfectly good enough for everything that you want to do. It has the torque to do some climbing. I climbed part of Black Bear Pass with all of my camping gear on it. There were some sections that were quite steep, and you'll see that in the braking section going down. And there wasn't a point in time where it didn't feel like it wasn't going to get up it. I didn't have to give it high RPMs and start slipping the clutch to control the speed. It was fine. So the US version of this bike comes with the quick shifter automatically as a default feature, and it works fine. It's nothing to write home about, but it functions as it's supposed to. Just a blip on the throttle and you're able to move the gears up, blip on the throttle and you're able to drop them down. So I don't know, nothing remarkable, just a quick shifter. I think you could probably get just as smooth as shifts if you were just blipping the throttle and you know how to shift without a clutch. I want to add one other thing is the good thing about only being 44 horsepower is you don't have to worry about this bike jumping out from underneath you. You don't have to worry about the power scaring you if you get into tricky situations and you're getting bounced around and you have a whiskey throttle type of incident. This bike's not just going to jump out. It has the power to do that, but because of the ride-by-wire feel to it, it's just not, it doesn't jump. It'll accelerate up and go, but the power is usable, it's controllable. Suspension of this bike, 6.7 inches of travel in the fork and 7.1 inches of travel in the rear wheel. It has adjustable front forks with compression and rebound dampening. The total amount of clicks on both of those is 29. To give you an idea of where I run it, I run 20 clicks from open on the bottom, so I've got it closed down, so there's like 9 clicks left to have it completely closed down. And rebound is 10 clicks up off of completely open. The reason I do that is I prefer to have something that's a little bit stiffer going into hits, but I want it to come back quicker for more successive hits so the forks don't pack up. That's just where I like it. I don't adjust it when I get on the road. I leave it there, so I run a little bit stiffer suspension. And then in the rear, it has 15 clicks, and it has a lot of adjustment. I think I'm running it around 3 or 4 from completely open because it can really stiffen up. KTM did a good job of speccing out the rear spring. In the way that I like to ride and setting the sag properly, it's 3 clicks off the bottom for proper sag. And then when I load it up with luggage, I've got 3 more clicks on the preload dial on there. And I will say it's a bit of a pain in the butt to adjust the preload on this, just trying to get the tool in there and move it around. But at least they do give you the tool with the bike so that you can adjust the preload. One of the things I've noticed on the front fork is the bike under its own weight is compressing the forks about an inch. And I feel like when I get on the bike and start riding, it's sinking even further into the fork travel. It's a bit softer than what I would like, but I've been able to dial some of that with the compression. I'd like to be able to change the spring out with something that's a little stiffer, and eventually I think that some aftermarket companies will start doing that, and there'll be some more tunability. I know that Tractive already has a replacement rear shock, so if you're not happy with that, you want some more adjustment, high speed, low speed, compression adjustments. Now, what this is like riding off-road, once I got it dialed in and I ride within the capabilities of this, I'm not trying to jump it, I'm not trying to go through crazy rocky, ledgy type of riding. I barely ever bottom it out. Now, I have bottomed the front forks out a couple times, finding some dips, and I've also bottomed the rear end coming off of things a bit hard, but that was my fault. If I had gone slower, I wouldn't have done that. And I think what is good about this bike is that because it has a limited travel, it makes me ride slower, and if I'm riding slower, I'm riding safer. And if I do have an off, it's going to be a slower speed off. And there's no reason, because this bike is pretty nimble, that I can't just pick my way through lines, riding aggressive Jeep trails and just go at a slower speed. So I like that part of it. I don't feel like I have to go faster to get over things because it's lighter, it's a little bit easier to control. I'll talk about the ground clearance while we're talking about suspension. With the current skid plate that's on it, it's only 8 inches, and I know I've seen quite a few complaints that the bike only has 8 inches of ground clearance. Let me just make this one note to anyone out there that's concerned about that. One is, pick your route, ride the bike within its limitations, and I had an F800 GS with the Alt-Rider skid plate, and it also only had 8 inches of ground clearance. So there's some complaints about this. Like I said in the beginning, this isn't an enduro bike. It's not going to have 10 or 12 inches of travel. It's purpose built. to get out, to have an adventure. You don't have to go do the hardcore crazy stuff. If that's what you're looking for, not the right bike. So I think that's about all I can say on the suspension. Ergonomics of this bike. When I got it, the bars, and you'll see this with everyone who talks about riding this bike, the bars are pretty low. When you are trying to ride off-road without bar risers or some sort of bar replacement, you're going to be bent over quite a bit. I was able to get a 22mm bar riser to install, and that helped quite a bit. And what I like about it is it keeps me low enough that I don't try to lock out my legs, and it keeps some bend in them when I'm up and riding through things. And it's high enough that it's comfortable for long periods of time riding off-road and doing the standing. If I had a longer bar riser, I might start standing too much upright and not have the bend in my knees, so I'm perfectly happy with the way this is. After spending 4 days of riding the Colorado Alpine passes and doing the Colorado Backcountry Discovery Route, even with this loaded up, there wasn't a period of time where I thought I need this taller. But keep in mind, I'm 5'10", and you know, I'm not the tallest person out there, about average. It was perfectly fine. Seat height wise is 33.5 inches. When I've got my off-road boots, I can get those down really easily. In tennis shoes here, I'm balls in my feet on both sides, and I've got the wider seat. If you want to adjust this, KTM makes a one-piece seat that should bring your legs in a little bit, help your feet touch a bit better. Now, I know there is a complaint about the foot pegs, and I have a couple thoughts on that. One is, what bike do you buy that doesn't have something that needs to be corrected? For this bike, it just happens to be the foot pegs. You can get replacement pegs that'll level things out, pivot pegs, you can use those. SW Motec has the Evo peg that you can put in, and will actually lower the peg as well, and you can correct this. I think it's $160 for the SW Motec foot peg for this bike. I don't find it to be a big deal. I've done a lot of riding off-road with it. I wear a big clunky adventure boot that is like a motocross boot, which is like a ski boot. It's stiff. So on these pegs, I don't even notice that it tilts forward. If I want to stand upright, my boot is so stiff, I can't tell what's underneath it other than I have a place to stand. So that's just my opinion on it. You know, if you don't like it, change it. If that is an issue for you, then you know, find a solution. But it hasn't been a big deal for me. All right, braking on this bike, I wasn't sure what to expect because it's a single rotor up front, but it is 320mm. I was expecting it not to brake as well as what I'm used to on the bigger bike, but to be honest, the braking on this bike has been so incredibly impressive. It brakes better than the big heavy R1200 GS, and I understand part of that is because of the weight, but this is only a single cylinder. The feel of the lever, the front lever in my fingers is great. I do most of my braking with my middle finger. I rarely engage my index finger because it has plenty of control. Now, I was going down the Black Bear Pass from where it turns into a one-way. It was very steep, it was very loose. I had no concerns whatsoever, and I was able to control my speed going down, not trying to go as fast as I can, but go in a very controlled manner.
Brakes on this are really good. Basically one fingering it. They're powerful. Lightweight, big rotor.
Front brakes have been fantastic off-road, never a concern, and it has ABS. It has what's called off-road ABS, so it's supposed to allow a little bit of slip in the front wheel. I have not felt the ABS engage at all when I've been off-road, putting it in the off-road mode, so impressive. Now, the back wheel, the rear brake, the one thing I will say is that has, in my boots, it has more of a vague feel. I can feel the lever, I can be pushing the lever, but I don't notice when it's starting to engage the brakes, and it doesn't feel like it has the same kind of modulation I'm used to with some of the other bikes that I've ridden. It still works. I can lock up the rear wheel if I really want to and I'm off-road, but I've got to get on it pretty good. But really, I do almost all of my braking off the front brake, so even on steep descents, I'm not using the rear brake a lot. Most of it off-road I'm doing front braking because the front brake works so well. Electronics package. It has a TFT screen. I'll cover that in more detail in the on-road portion of my discussion about this bike, I think, because it applies a little bit more there. But there's two things that are really important about this bike. Is it has traction control and it has ABS, but not just any ABS or traction control, but it also has lean angle, which is quite remarkable for a bike in this price range, being considered an entry-level adventure bike. Now, when you get off-road, I always turn the traction control off. I haven't tried riding it with it on to see how much engagement it has. Probably should do that at some point, but I just knock it off. Now, I know there is a problem with the traction control. If you stall the bike out and don't restart it in a certain period of time, the traction control turns itself back on. And every time you turn the bike off and turn it back on, the traction control turns itself back on. So I've found a number of times where I've had to make sure the traction control was turned off if I've stalled the bike, if I got stuck, if I stopped. So it's just something to remember. But it's pretty easy to see on the dash where it says ABS and MTC. You can see what mode it's in, whether it's off or in the off-road. But really, for an entry-level bike, it's a pretty good package, and I like having those little extra safety features when I go out and ride. All right, I just want to provide a few final thoughts that are kind of miscellaneous thoughts, and that is the bash guard on this bike it's terrible. There's a rail that's under the engine that attaches the bash guard, so it's not really a bash guard or a skid plate. It's more of kind of like a debris, something to keep the debris or rocks from kicking up. But if you're going to do any amount of off-roading, you have to replace that. Now, Black Dog Cycle Works has a skid plate that's going to be released. I think first production goes in December. I've ordered one. When I get that in, I will talk about the installation of it and give everyone a view of what that will look like. And it should really protect that engine so you're not getting any contact transmitted up into the engine. If this is a bike that you're interested in, keep in mind it has some limitations. Ride within those limitations and you'll be perfectly happy. If you're expecting to go out and jump this bike and do extreme off-road riding, it's not the right bike for you. If you're planning to go do 500, 600, 700 mile days on the road, it's probably not the right bike for you there either. But if you want a bike that is capable of carrying all of your camping gear, getting you off on the forest roads, finding great camping spots, then this is a brilliant bike for it. It has plenty of horsepower, it's comfortable to ride, it is confidence inspiring because it's so stable riding off-road. Whether you're riding fast on the forest roads or picking your way through rocky terrain. I just spent some time riding in the mud today and I had no concerns. I had to put my feet down a few times to skid steer, but even standing and having it wiggle around, it wasn't a concern. It is good to be riding a light bike. And if you're tired of riding the big, heavy 500+ pound adventure bikes, I recommend you give this bike a try because it'll do everything you were doing on those big bikes, but it'll do it more comfortably and you'll feel more at ease when you're doing the off-road riding. So I hope you found this video to be a bit informative. Maybe I talked about a few things that you haven't heard of. If you have any questions about this bike, maybe something that I forgot to talk about, leave that in the comments and I will get back to you on it. I have enjoyed this bike so much. I only have 2,200 miles on it, but there isn't a single thing that I wouldn't do on it. I am going to do a video that focuses on the on-road performance of it because there's some differences that I thought would be too much for a single video. So thanks for watching. Get out and do some riding, and I will see you out there. I'm really pleased with myself. I replenished my toilet paper supply from the state park, so now I'm good for a day or two. I was getting to be desperate.